All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Beyond the Ballot. Today, we're going to be talking about the Virginia gubernatorial race for 2025. In 2025, there are two gubernatorial races. Both are actually going to be very interesting. New Jersey, which has made hard swings to the right, and Virginia, who is coming off popular Republican governor in Glenn Youngkin. And Trump did better in the 2024 election than I think most people were expecting. He ultimately lost it by less than 6 points, lost the state by less than 6 points. But Kamala Harris still won that by around 250,000 votes. But this Virginia race, gubernatorial race, is going to be very interesting to watch, just as it was in 2021 when Glenn Youngkin was elected, where he beat McAuliffe by just around 2%. And Youngkin ran mostly on the issues, on the social issues of transgenderism in schools and things like that, and some of those woke, identity politics type issues, especially with regards to how it has come into the schools and is affecting young people and is being pushed on young people. And he ran on that, and he ultimately won that governor's race. And it's looking like, obviously, the candidates haven't officially been chosen yet, but it's looking like Winsome Sears will be the candidate for the Republicans, the selected candidate for the Republicans. And Winsome Sears, I think, is actually a very good candidate for Republicans in Virginia, because she's not super right wing. She's not super MAGA. She's sort of been back and forth on Trump. She supported him in 2020, but then after the midterms where Republicans underperformed, especially MAGA associated candidates and really Trump adjacent candidates underperformed, Winsome Sears kind of backed off her support of Trump, said she didn't really like him anymore and couldn't support him. But then 2024 came and she reverted back to supporting him. So the optics of that obviously aren't great. It sort of comes across as she's flipping on her positions to be whatever is politically convenient. But who in politics doesn't do that, It's very few people who don't kind of change their perspective on some things due to what is most beneficial to them politically. So Winsome Sears was the lieutenant governor alongside Glenn Youngkin. So she's already served in a position that very much qualifies her to be the governor. And what's interesting about Winsome Sears, obviously, as you can see, is she's a Black woman who is also a Republican, who is a conservative. And obviously, Black women are not exactly the traditional demographic of Republicans and Republican support. And so that is interesting. And you say, well, what does that spell? Well, if we come look at the numbers for the 2024 election at the national level, right, using the Cook political swingometer, I punched in the numbers here, and what you saw was Trump improve in a lot of these areas. Not enough to win Virginia, even in this model. This model sort of overestimated Trump even a little bit per these numbers. They estimated that he would win this by just under 5%. That he would lose this by just under 5%. He actually ended up losing it by just under 6%. So this, putting in the numbers into this model, obviously the model's not perfect, but gets you in the general vicinity of what we're talking about. And so we see that Trump's numbers with Hispanics were 52 to 46 in favor of Harris. That's obviously much better than what's expected. With African Americans, 85 to 13. That's a little better than expected. And so you say, where is Winsome Sears going to pick up ground that Trump couldn't? Well, obviously, I think African Americans is where she could make up some ground. We know that minority voters are more likely to vote on things as, as simple as this person looks like me, this person understands my experience, sort of those more identity politics motivations and relationships to the candidate. They're more inclined to vote on those grounds than white college graduates, white people in general, are less inclined to vote strictly on those identity politics grounds. So I think Winston Sears can gain there, but we do have a few polls. So in this poll from Mason-Dixon, in a hypothetical matchup with Representative Bobby Scott, she's actually favored right now by 2 points. Obviously, that's still within the margin of error, but this one poll shows her up by 2. And so that's very positive early signs for Republicans. But there is a candidate that's perhaps more favored to be the candidate, to be the official candidate, and that's former Representative Abigail Spanberger. And Abigail Spanberger is a white lady, this lady right here. And pretty conventional Democratic candidate, Spanberger, nothing terribly exciting. But in a left-leaning state, oftentimes that can be enough. They just vote with their party affiliation. And what you see here is through 2 polls, Spanberger leads in the average by 2 points, obviously still within the margin of error of any of those polls. But if we do a deeper dive into this Emerson poll that shows Spanberger up just 1, we can get an idea of where Winsome Sears might see some improvements in different demographics over somebody like Trump. Like where is she going to make up that number? So Trump, lost Virginia by just under 6 points. What demographics are going to change? What voting blocks have to change in order for Winsome Sears to make up that 6% and win the election? Well, if you come in here and look at the numbers, and I realize there's a lot of information, that probably an overwhelming amount, but it's actually pretty straightforward. So you see here, you have the column for Spanberger and the column for Sears. And over here, you see the demographics by race. And you come and you take a look here and you see Spanberger's coming in at about 73%. Sears is coming in at about 10%. Now, polls this early tend to not reflect the actual amount of people that will voting. They tend not to, add up to that sort of 100% mark, just because people are voting or people are responding to the poll as undecided or other or don't know or things like that. And so obviously, if you do the math on that, 73% plus 10% is 83%. You're asking yourself, where is that other 17%? Well, they're likely people that are undecided or don't have an opinion at this present time because it is an early poll. But so I wouldn't expect that the final numbers on African-American voters in a Virginia gubernatorial election would be 73 to 10. You're going to see improvements, I think, probably for both candidates in that regard. But what might be interesting and what might stay consistent is the margin, right? So 73 to 10, that's a 63 point lead with the African American demographic for Spanberger, right? Now, if that margin holds, that'll be a significant improvement over Trump, who the margin was 72%. So 72 to 63%, you're making up solid ground with that demographic, right? So let's take a look here also at some of these other demographics, right? Well, white voters, it's 50 to 35. That's a 15-point margin. If you come up here, I mean, this divides by college grad versus non-college grad. But if you sort of average this out, what you're going to get is, mid 50s for Trump and maybe mid 40s for Harris, right? I haven't done the exact math, but it would be around like 54% here and around 44% here. So around 10 points. And you come over here and you see Winsome Sears, 15-point lead there, 15-point margin lead with white voters there. So again, making up more ground there because we've seen a shift in especially young white voters, but even white college grad voters as the Republicans have sort of embraced the tech bro side of the population. You see more, particularly millennial white voters voting Republican. And so that may be in a place like Virginia, that may be a greater appeal for Sears, whose margin with that demographic in this poll is outperforming the national results for Trump, which may be surprising to some people. So the demographics are interesting to look at. The margins are interesting to look at. I'm not going to go through all these numbers. Obviously, that would be way too much. But you see some areas with regards to age where Sears does worse than Trump did at the national level. You see some ages where she does better. And so it's going to be a different voter makeup. And we know this because obviously this is a statewide election versus a national election. A national election, especially for president, is always going to draw more people. So you have to start asking yourself about turnout. Who's going to turn out? Well, even though Sears might be making gains with black voters there, what if their turnout is really low? Is that going to benefit her, or is that going to sort of neutralize the gains that she made? It's tough to say at this point. You kind of just have to see, but history would suggest that some of those minority voters, African Americans, even Hispanics, don't come out for these smaller elections. They'll come out for the big ones, president, right? But they'll stay home for, especially like an off year like 2025, which only has, 2 gubernatorial races, right? They'd sit home for something like that and not turn out to the polls. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on as well. But then you have to think about, what was going on in Virginia when Youngkin was able to win, right? Well, abortion was still sort of at the federal level, right? It was still being talked about with regards to Roe v. Wade. It hadn't quite set in yet that this was going to be a strictly states issue. You saw a lot of outrage more at the federal level. And certainly when Youngkin, was running, was kind of a fresh thing. And it wasn't recognized as, people weren't thinking of it really as a state issue because they haven't thought about it that way for so long. But now that, we've had time to sit with it and understand that that's what a issue like abortion is going to be, I think that'll change sort of change the makeup of voters for these statewide elections, like governors. And abortion is a very winning issue for Democrats. So while Harris, sort of at the national level in the 2024 election, tried to make an appeal to suburban women on the grounds of them being single issue voters with abortion, while you saw an attempt to make that appeal, it didn't really turn out that way, because I think people started to realize, one, that Trump wasn't saying he was going to issue a federal abortion ban. He was saying it was going to go to the states. Well, if it's going to go to the states, then Trump and Harris aren't really going to have too much say over the issue. It's going to come down to the state level. And so I think a lot of people were looking for more than just that single issue. A lot of suburban women, a lot of white women were looking for more than just that abortion issue. They were looking at economic issues and other things. But for a gubernatorial race, playing that single issue card and trying to appeal now here in 2025 could work a lot better than it did for somebody like Harris, who was running at the national level. So Spanberger could make that appeal, and I think have better results. So what does that mean for Winsome Sears? Well, Winsome Sears also is a woman, right? We talked about sort of those voters who vote on the basis of identity. Does this person understand my experience, kind of thing? Does this person look like me, have the same experiences? And that may very well be some women. And because Winsome Sears is a woman as well, maybe they will revert back to single issue. Maybe they will side with Sears if they're more a moderate Republican. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with regards to that, and with regards to the campaign that Spanberger would run, and the issues she chooses to focus on. But I imagine abortion is going to be a huge one, and they're going to hammer that home. So for Sears, could Sears run on the same issues as Youngkin? Potentially. Is that going to generate as much enthusiasm, bring as many people out to the polls as it did in 2021? I'm not so sure. I don't think necessarily anyone can predict that. I think until we see more polls and we see what these candidates' actual pitch is going to be, we won't necessarily know how people in Virginia are responding to that. It could still very well be a pressing issue. I mean, Democrats don't seem to be letting go of this transgender stuff, the transgender people in women's sports and things like that. And that's a huge winning issue for Republicans, particularly with the sports, with transgender people overall, and recognizing transgenders. And it's sort of like a whatever about biological reality for some people. The numbers get a little bit closer there. But with regards to sports in particular, and things like that in schools, activities like that in schools, it's overwhelmingly in favor of the Republican side of things. But can Winsome Sears make that issue again in Virginia a dominant issue that and prominent issue that voters should care about? I'm not so sure. And especially with Youngkin attaching himself more and more to Trump in the 2024 cycle, campaigning for Trump, pushing for Trump, aligning himself with Trump in a way that I don't think he necessarily really did in 2021. Well, Winsome Sears being the lieutenant governor, does she get kind of dragged along with that? And now she's more associated with Trump. She did endorse him in 2024. She did say she'd support him in 2024. Now all of a sudden, do they get linked? And Trump's popularity at any given time becomes a factor. But Trump is very popular right now. Can he carry that a full year to the next election cycle? We'll just have to wait and see. People right now really are dissatisfied with the direction of the country. As you can see here, the average, RCP average for right direction or wrong track, minus 34. Those are horrible numbers. Obviously, Biden is still the president. How will that change once Trump takes office? I don't know. We'll have to see. Certainly where it will be next November or November 2025 is anybody's guess at this point. But based off some of the decisions Trump is making, based off some of the moves he's making, playing very much to people's concerns about immigration, and he's obviously going to come in and immediately make executive orders about that issue. I think economy, obviously Trump has threatened and used as a negotiating tactic tariffs, which aren't always great for the economy, certainly not great for bringing down prices, which was a big deal for a lot of voters. And so does that become an issue? And do people see that as a state issue? These are the questions that will become more and more clear. The answers to which will become more and more clear as more polling is done, as we hear the candidates' pitches as far as what they're making the priority issue. But I think that Winsome Sears, just based off her identity, her experience, is a strong candidate. But I think that the abortion issue for Democrats is going to be one at these gubernatorial elections that they'll be able to take a lot greater advantage of than they were in the 2024 election cycle, when people were thinking more about that federal level of things and the president and senators and representatives, things like that. So I think Winsome Sears definitely has a shot. She'll make ground with a number of demographics. African Americans probably improve on women. Will it be enough for a Democrat leaning or even sometimes likely Democrat state like Virginia? I don't know. We'll know more as it gets closer to that election time. But I think Republicans should feel a lot of confidence in a candidate like Winsome Sears and carefully watch what the dominant issues are as we get closer to that election cycle. So guys, if you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed this analysis, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.